Let's take a look at this game between Tim and Leif. It's a very tactical battle, and I think you'll all like it. So we start with this Benoni defense, and both players are playing pretty standard book moves at this point. White's gained a lot of space, and Black's idea is to try to take advantage, I think, of this long diagonal over here in a little bit. So we'll see a few more moves. Pawns get traded. Reinforce the center here. This also gives some space for this bishop to come out. And you're not too worried about this bishop. It's going to come out to this side over here. And standard developing moves. And so Black is expanding on the queen side here and is planning to get this move b5 in if they can. And the idea, right, is that if they can get this move in, then they've secured some space for themselves on the queen side, whereas White's kind of controlling the center with these two central pawns. And right here, this would be the move, I think, for Black to push in the center, or to push on the queen side here and get this pawn rolling down the board. This then gives Black a lot of space to be able to pull their pieces. You know, the knight can maybe reroute this way, you know, fight for the c4 square or something like that. Castling, though, is definitely a pretty standard move. The problem that Black's going to run into, especially after this move a4, is it's hard to get these pieces into the game. Both this bishop and knight want to go to this d7 square, and there's not any other locations around for them right now to move to. So it's going to kind of take a little bit of work for Black to maneuver their pieces around so they can get their pieces out. And yeah, here's an interesting situation. So White reinforced the pawn with the bishop. I think better is you want to drop the knight, and then eventually you're going to move this, I think, this pawn to f3, I believe. Maybe it goes all the way to f4. But the idea is you want to get this f pawn kind of moving, but you defend the center with these knights. Bringing the bishop, there's already interesting tactics in the position here, and Black can, though it's tricky, actually take the pawn to the center. And if, you know, however White decides to take back, they get hit with this f5, and lots of possibilities start to open up. But I think seeing that general tactic is pretty important for Black. This would help start to free the position a little bit more. You start to secure a little bit more space. You've taken out one of these central pawns that's cramping your position. And then if you got your, you know, maybe your knight gets relocated over to here, not like that, but like this, you'd have a bit more, you'd have more space, you know, to navigate. And yeah, and I think the only thing that Black could be worried about in any of these lines, same if it takes with the bishop, you still play this f5, is this open diagonal here. But because this pawn is in the way, you should be okay at defending this. Your king would slide over into this corner and should be pretty safe. Instead, the Black queen comes out to the side, which tries to put a pin here to take advantage of this pawn. But it's pretty easy for White to counter that. And then with a couple more moves, now White's gotten castled, which interestingly the computers wants you know, probably some different option, but this is, I think, a totally reasonable move for a human to make. What the computer's saying is that you could start pushing this pawn forward. So instead of the knight coming forward, you actually hit this bishop, the bishop retreats, and then you bring the knight into this open square here. And if there's any capture, you just, you know, you can take the e5 pawn. And again, now you've kind of started to break open this central control for White. And I think seeing that c4 push is probably a good, if you're playing these Benoni structures, I think that is like one of the common ideas. It's either to get this pawn going this way, you know, so you can take advantage of this c4 square. Your pawn is, this advanced pawn is one of black's, you know, best pieces. You are looking at the c5 square though too, so it's natural to want to put the knight here. But after the exchanges, what I think starts to happen is the rook isn't ideal on the c5 square. It's going to get hit with the pawn eventually. It's going to get driven back, and then that's going to give white more central control in the position. And that's exactly what happens. Rook gets driven back, and now you'll be able to get this bishop out now, but these pawns are now starting to threaten to roll forward a little bit, and this could be pretty tough for black to handle. So black tries to get the bishop out, try to open this up, try to get this pawn moving forward, and then white makes this pawn move here, and right here is where tactics can get sharp. I know Tim's a pretty fast player overall, and I think this is one of those situations where that worked against him. Taking a little bit more time here, you should see this move e5, and probably what you're worried about is like, well, there's two pieces attacking it and only one defender. But after the rook recaptures, there's this bishop coming out, basically pinning, skewering, like all of the things along this diagonal here. And just like a little bit, I think, a little bit of extra time in this position, because you brought your rook over to this e-file. You're setting up this pawn push, and I think like just taking that time to say, can I play the pawn push, and looking at all the lines there, should be able to show that, yeah, you can definitely get away with it. I don't think there's any real solution for black at this point. If you get this pawn move in, the pieces will just start getting driven back. You know, if taking is bad, because you'd get these connected pawns in the center here, then the only other things you could look at is bringing the knight to the side. But that must give good opportunities for white to play. But instead, the pawn moves forward here, which then allows black to get this b5 move in with tempo, and the bishop gets driven back, and then the knight gets hit as well. So this pawn is now, you know, been marched down the board and is attacking white center. So now the position's kind of reversed. White tries to defend their center as much as they can and gives up the piece. They at least get maybe some pressure along this diagonal here. And black comes out attacking the rook. King moves out of the way of the queen along this diagonal. It's just kind of a good instinct, you know, in general. And then black tries to take advantage of the a-file. And now you start to see this pressure starts to build. I was wondering about maybe back here, is there some way to trade pieces? Either maybe, you know, drop the knight to d7. You know, if this bishop moves off of this diagonal, that's got to be good for black, because then this bishop would be free. And then any kind of exchanges, give a check, you drop back. This should be really fine for black. The knight could come to f8 and help defend the king, and everything should be pretty easy to defend at this point. But with that pressure, now the queen drops back to help reinforce the knight. And then this pawn move does get going, and it's really hard for black to find the right counters to it. So they take and then drop the knight back. There was, and these are wild computer tactics, these are not tactics that I would see. There's a question about what to do if you can capture here, but a rook would absolutely slide over, pinning the knight. And then like the moves that you have to find are, it's this one, this rook move down to here to save it. So it's too much tactics there. So black Leif brings the knight back, you know, trying to hold on to trying to keep the pieces tight and connected together. But Tim plays with a lot of energy and just keeps jamming the pawns down the board. And this is the best way to play when you have these central pawns, is to just constantly put your opponent under pressure here. If they can start rolling forward, you start to pry open the king, you start to get tactics. Leif trades off a piece and captures the pawn in the center, but just gets replaced with another pawn. A knight tries to drop back for the defense, but that drops the rook in the corner. And then with this queen invasion, the queen's threatening, to come in with a check here, which would, drive the king to, probably inferior squares, or potentially, what happens, leading to a checkmate. Also, this pawn can still move forward, which is a hard thing for black to deal with. Leif tries to bring the queen up to try to cover the square, but after a check, we get pawn gets captured with a fork. The rook's going to drop off, and then black would be up 2 rooks versus a knight and a bishop, and that would be too much, and Leif resigned the game there.